Hey guys, welcome. As you know, or if you don't know, I'm Nomi. I'm a life coach and cognitive behavioral therapist. And again, if you don't know what that is, look it up or watch my previous videos for an explanation. And also, just a note that these videos are kind of a build up. So, if you haven't seen the previous videos, I highly suggest that you do go and see them for your own benefits. So today we'll be talking about value, currency, and judgment. And I'll explain what I mean by value and currency. So value and currency is basically what makes you feel valuable and drives or motivates your behavior. So I'll obviously make an example of myself. And what drives my behavior more than anything else is honesty or authenticity. So basically just saying what you mean and meaning what you say. And the reason for this, where this comes from, is from obviously the folks not being very upfront with a lot of things and basically just saying things just to get me to do certain things that they want, right? And another one is follow through. So what I mean by follow through is saying you'll do something and then doing it. Imagine that. And of course, again, where this comes from is from the folks making promises and then not keeping them on very many occasions. And then another one is power, but power over yourself or power over myself. And of course, this comes from the control that they exerted so much of. And another one would have to be warmth, kindness, and basically just connection. And obviously, this comes from, with all the behaviors that were, directed towards me, we didn't really have the time to, get very close and, have that intimacy, have, that good relationship. So yeah, these are the things that kind of drive my behaviors, and these are the things that sort of motivate me to do the things that I do, hence also my choice in career. Okay, so now there's a dark side to how this all plays out, because I mean at first with the honesty thing or authenticity, I would be very untrusting. I didn't trust people. I had a very hard time. Didn't want to, because obviously I was afraid of being disappointed, of being hurt and things like that, and I literally just could not. It's just something that did not come very naturally to me. And with the follow through, I basically learned to start things and then never finish them. And so that means you have a bunch of projects, a bunch of ideas, and all these things that you start and get excited about, but in the end, you just don't follow through with those things, because again, this is the behavior that I was accustomed to, that I was used to, that I was taught. This is learned behavior. And with the power over oneself, with the control, obviously, I had a hard time being forthcoming about things that I wanted, things that I needed, and even just in general, just going for things, like to the point of, being afraid to try stuff if it wasn't suggested by certain people that I kind of put on a pedestal or valued or whatever it was. I just wouldn't go for those things because I'd be afraid of what they'd say, what they'd think, and just be afraid of going for it, because that requires having power over yourself and not being controlled and being made a puppet and being told, okay, this is what you should do, this is what you must do, this is what you have to do. And these words that I've just used, have to, should, must, I tend to not like to use such words. I've kind of taken them out of my vocab when it comes to, suggesting things to myself or making decisions, because there's nothing that I must do or have to do or should do. Like, should do according to who? Exactly. You know what I mean? So basically, I just convinced myself as a result of all these things now. I convinced myself, that I wasn't a people's person, which is ridiculous because considering what I do for a living, I socialize all day. You know what I mean? It's my job to basically speak to people, but at the same time, I kind of convinced myself that I was not this person. And this was because, I didn't want to, again, be disappointed or be let down. And, I would judge myself before anybody else could judge me. Because, if you jump ahead of it, then, by the time that someone else says it, it's not a thing. It's something you already know. It's something you've already told yourself. Again, this voice becoming yours. And, even in relationships, I would, as soon as things got serious, I would just shut that shit down. Kind of hurt them before they hurt me, kind of thing. I just had this mentality, the whole world is out to get me. Had these very high walls, just wasn't open at all. And I kind of also convinced myself that I hated all these things. And a lot of those things that I hated are things that I never tried. Because again, that fear of trying things, that fear of being disappointed, or just always waiting for things to happen. And that's the thing, I always waited for things to happen to me. I didn't go out and do things. I didn't go out and, seek anything. I would just wait for life to happen, which is not good and doesn't work if you have, certain ideas about the kind of life that you actually want to live. You have to actually, actively take steps towards said life. And, I always expected a no. I always, without a doubt, expected a no. So again, wouldn't ask for things, wouldn't try things, wouldn't, bond with people, wouldn't really socialize that much because, I expected that disappointment. I expected those no's. And, these are things that that I basically set up in my head. And they weren't actually the reality of, the situation. And so now I actually remember I went to this one high school. Won't really say which one it was, but I went to this one high school, and there were these trips that were taken every year, trips abroad. And, I was always afraid to ask to go to these trips because, I looked at, the prices, they were hella steep. And, my parents kind of always hinted that, already they're paying so much for my fees. So any extra things, like, I'm pushing it. So, as a result, I just never asked to go on any of these trips. And then when it was my final year, one of my parents was speaking to another parent, and then this whole trips abroad situation came up. And this parent of mine was like, later on, speaking to me now, it's like, oh, I didn't know there were such trips at your school. How come you've never asked to go to any of these? was so annoyed. I was so freaking annoyed because, again, they always sort of hinted, and not even sort of, they always said to my face, we're paying so much for your fees, etc., etc., etc. Extras are, fuck that, they're a no. And so now, my final year, all these years later, when all these trips have taken place, and you obviously, people go on these trips and they come back and they talk about these trips, and now years later, for them to then ask me why I never went on any of these trips or asked to go to any of these trips, I was just like, wow, what a wow. But it doesn't just end with the dark side, because when you haven't made it through these things, when you are not self-aware, because that is kind of the actual point of this video, is for us to learn to be more self-aware so that we are able to then actively take steps towards the future that we want, and the life that we want, essentially. And so what needs to happen is that, what I did with myself is that, with the honesty thing, or authenticity, I would then just give people the benefit of the doubt, and not just immediately just be like, okay, don't trust you, fuck that. And even with myself, I kind of have this thing of being very clear in what I say. So I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. I tend to be very clear, and even with other people, I tend to seek clarity. So if someone says something, it's like, okay, if I don't get it, I will clarify and be like, okay, so what do you actually mean? What are you actually saying? Don't beat about the bush, or, make these cryptic statements. Just tell me what you actually mean. Tell me what you actually want. Tell me what you need. And then, we can go from there. And then it's an actual conversation. You know what I mean? And with the follow through, basically it's just teaching yourself commitment, teaching yourself consistency. And I actually remember a report card that I had. I think it was in primary school, where one of the teacher's notes was that, I do well, for a little bit, especially after we have certain talks, or like in the beginning of the year, or, just after we've had a break or whatever. I have these really high points, but I lack consistency. And so, consistency is a very important thing. If you're trying to achieve goals, if you're trying to do things, you need that shit. And so, that stuck in my mind. Like, I actually remember it from time to time, especially when I feel like, giving up on something, or I feel like, I'm over this, in the middle of doing it, or I'm just not that motivated anymore. Then I just kind of revert back to that, and I'm like, lacks consistency. And then, I kind of just put on my big boy shorts and carry on, because, if I want something, I'm the only one that can make sure that I get it by being consistent, by following through and keeping promises to myself. Because, when you make a commitment, you're making a promise not to anybody else, but to yourself. And so if you're breaking promises to yourself, babe, how are you gonna achieve anything? How are you gonna do anything? How are you ever going to get to that life that you want? You know what I mean? And so it requires consistency, and it requires you to make a commitment to yourself and follow through on that commitment. And so I hold myself accountable. I don't wait for anybody to remind me, like, hey, this is what you need to do. Hey, this is what you said you do. And, I think a lot of people that know me know that I hold people accountable, so they tend not to make promises that they can't keep, because I will hold you to it. If you say something to me, if you make a promise, I will hold you to it, because that's what you said, and I took you at your word. And so, buddy, you need to follow through. And then the whole thing of being self-aware. So being aware of your emotions. So how I did that is sort of noticing my patterns, noticing my thoughts, and noticing my behaviors. And with that, it's like, okay, this makes me angry, or in this situation, even if it's past, just, when you think about it, okay, I got very angry in that situation. Then I would ask myself, okay, why was I angry in that situation? Because, anger tends to be a secondary emotion. So underneath the anger, it tends to be hurt or embarrassment or, things like that. So, I'd introspect and ask myself, so what is it about that situation or about that conversation that made me angry? Was I just projecting on the other person, or whatever? Am I feeling hurt by something that they said that kind of just, hit that soft spot? Because, sometimes when someone says something that is true and really resonates with you in a way that you kind of don't want to accept, and don't want to admit, sometimes you can get angry. And it's not that you're actually angry, you're just like, fuck that. Don't be, telling such deep truths. You know what I mean? So it's really important for the, to avoid conflicts, unnecessary conflicts, and putting yourself in a position where you're later regretting things that you've said or things that you've done, and just acting on impulse or acting on your emotions. It's important to have control over your own emotions, and I'm putting control in inverted commas, because it's not that when you're angry you're gonna pretend not to be angry, or when you're sad you're gonna pretend not to be sad. No, it's good to express your emotions, but it's not good to react on impulse. So when you're angry, it's good to just, again, introspect, think about, how a certain thing made you feel, why it made you feel like that, and where that comes from, and then make a decision, an informative, calm decision that's based on logic, and then go from there, make a decision from there, based on actual logic, and not just based on, your emotions that you might have failed to control. And another thing is just, with decisions, again, your decisions need to be based on yourself and not based on other people. So if I made a decision or had a decision to make, I would question whether, I'm leaning towards a certain thing because I think it would make so and so happy, because so and so would then be proud of me. Things like that. Like, what is the reason behind the decisions that I've made, or what is behind the decision that I'm going to make? Why am I choosing, that particular decision? And that kind of clarifies a lot of things and takes the distortions away, and makes it actually a little bit easier to make decisions, because okay, I'm making this decision because it makes sense in this and this and this kind of way, because it's something that I actually want, because it's actually in line with my dreams and my goals, things like that, instead of basing it on external factors, because no, we don't want to make decisions based on external factors, because they lead not to the path of our happy life. They lead not to the path of our dreams, right? So also another thing is that I stopped judging myself. Okay, because with this voice that becomes your own, you tend to criticize and judge yourself the most. So before anybody can even judge you, like I said earlier, you sort of do that prior. You do that like hectically. You're your worst critic. And I mean, sure, it's good to hold yourself up to a standard, but don't have unrealistic expectations of yourself. Don't expect yourself to be perfect, because I kind of had this thing. If I didn't get something right the first time, I'd be fucking crushed. Because perfection was kind of always expected of me, and so as a result I also had this same expectation of myself. If something was not perfect, then I'd be going crazy. I'd be like, beating myself up, obviously in my mind. And, I'd be saying all these negative things to myself, like, oh shit, bruh, like, why couldn't you do that? You're not skilled enough, you're not smart enough, you're not this enough, blah, 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 blah. And, that's not good, because what that does is just cripple you instead of, giving you the power to, look at a situation and be like, okay, well, this is what I tried and it didn't work. Why didn't it work? Because maybe I could have done this differently, I could have done this differently, and then tried again and it works out better. And if it doesn't, so the fuck what? Like, I was afraid of failure. And I've heard it so many times where, when you ask people, what's your biggest fear? And a lot of people fear failure. And I think it's something that we need to get comfortable with. You need to get comfortable with failure, and not in the sense that now you need to revel in it and stay there, but in the sense that when you do fail at something, it's because you tried something. It means that you did something. You're not just sitting there again waiting for things to happen or waiting for life to happen. You're actually going for it. You're going for things. You're putting yourself out there, and when you do that, then you learn a lot, you grow a lot, because you have all these experiences and you have the knowledge and wisdom from experience. So don't be afraid of failing. It's not the end of the world. Very cliche quote, it doesn't matter how many times you fall, but how many times you actually get up. When you fall, then you just get the fuck up and try again and try again until you fucking get it right, or until you figure out that's not for you and maybe you need to try something else. You know what I mean? That's how you figure things out. You fail a couple of times. It's just a part of life, and it's something that we really should take, the stigma away from, because it's not actually something to be ashamed of at all. And so what I did was that I learned to forgive myself, and by forgive myself I mean forgive myself for having that warped mentality of being afraid of failure, and therefore being so harsh on myself and being so critical, like overly, not constructively critical, but just like overly bashing critical of myself. So I had to forgive myself for that. And that doesn't mean that you don't take responsibility for any of your behavior or the things that you say or your actions or anything like that. You do take responsibility for those things. You own them. If you did something and it didn't work, then that's fine. That's what you did, and this was the outcome. How do we move on from there? If you did something wrong, own it. That's what you did. Make it right and then move on. You know, it's nothing to hide, it's nothing to be ashamed of, it's something to learn from. You know, we need to be more open to learning as opposed to judging. And actually, the less you judge yourself, the less you actually judge other people, and the more, you know, you're open, you're more compassionate, and things like that. And again, I was, you know, because I was so very judgmental of myself, I was very judgmental of other people. And again, with the whole trust thing and, you know, the control thing and all these other things, I wasn't open, I wasn't trusting, I wasn't, God, I wasn't, you know, I didn't enjoy anything, and I was afraid to try things. And, you know, I was just afraid to live life in general. And this hinders the whole process of growth. It hinders the whole process of enjoying one's life. I didn't fucking enjoy my life because I was fucking miserable the whole time. And so, you know, I took that out on other people. You know, people who weren't deserving. Not to say that there are people who are deserving, but, you know, I took that out on other people because I wasn't happy with myself. And so, you know, misery loves company. So what do? You make other people miserable. Even if that's not your thought process, but that is essentially what your behavior turns out to be. And so, you know, those are the things that I would do and constantly do in order to get myself out from this dark place and get myself out from this warped, distorted perception. And, you know, as soon as you realize that and then start changing the way that you think, start changing, you know, your perception and your behavior as a result, then things start to change as well. Things start to be different. You start seeing these things in your actual reality because you have changed your perception. Another cliche, you know, they say that be the change that you want to see in the world, and that really could not be more true. Because as soon as I started to change the way that I think, then my feelings started to be different. I started to feel different. And because I felt different, I started to behave differently. And that is why I love cognitive behavioral therapy, because it is based on that connection of your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior. And that whole cycle, because when you do change the way that you think, then a lot of things change, because you're not looking through a distorted lens. You're looking through a very clear lens. You're seeing things as they are. You're not seeing them, you know, you're not projecting, you know, the chaos inside out into the world. Instead, you're dealing with it, you're owning it, and you're learning to, you know, move past it and grow past it. And you know, I started to enjoy things without feeling guilty, without feeling shame, because I don't know, there was somehow some sort of guilt and shame that was there when, you know, I was enjoying myself, or, you know, I was laughing too hard, or whatever it is, because back at the ranch, it was always just super serious. It was always just perfection, this, that, and the other thing, expectations, this, that. And so, you know, when I wanted to enjoy things, I felt guilty. And so I stopped doing that as well. And now I can actually enjoy things without feeling guilty, without feeling shame. I can say no without feeling guilty. I can try new things and not be embarrassed, you know, not be afraid to make a fool of myself, not be fool of myself, not be afraid to, you know, just go for things. And, you know, if I get a no, then it's a no, but I tried. And if something doesn't work out, then it just doesn't fucking work out. But I know I'm not gonna keep wondering for the rest of my life what could have been, you know, because I went for it. And so, you know, you have to then move to that positive outlook if you want to start seeing the actual changes in your life. And you have to take actual steps towards said life. And, you know, just run through the things that I've spoken about in this video and obviously reflect them back to yourself and your own world and your own reality your own reality, and see how you can then start making changes towards that life that we want, that is chosen by us, for us, and not dictated to us by anybody, and a life that makes us happy, because this is what we want. And you know, just being fulfilled and being content, you know, you actually start to sleep easier because you're happy, and you know that, you know, you did everything that you could. You're not afraid to put yourself out there. So, you know, you did everything that you could. You reacted the way that you wanted to. You behaved the way that you wanted to. And it was just the situation that didn't work out, and that's fine. You're not left wondering. And on that note, I am going to end it there. Be sure to like, to subscribe, to comment, to share, and all the rest of it, so that you are notified when I upload a new video, and you are notified when I have giveaways, because there is a giveaway. Entries start tomorrow. I'm gonna leave the link in the description below, and you can enter and possibly win yourself a few sessions with me, and yeah, then we can start changing your life. So I will see you guys next time. Also, please do not be afraid to comment about, you know, suggestions on, you know, maybe even your own situation that you would like me to break down and discuss, and tell you, you know, what sort of steps you can, or tools you can use to start, you know, leading yourself towards that life that you want, and leading yourself towards happiness and contentment and all the rest of it. So yeah, I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.